Good morning. This is a reading from Colossians 3, 1 to 17. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, is revealed to the whole world, you will share in all his glory. So put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshipping the things of this world. Because of these sins, the anger of God is coming. You used to do these things when your life was still part of this world. But now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, and dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you have stripped off your old sinful nature and all its wicked deeds. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you are a Jew or a Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters, and he lives in all of us. Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. And let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts, for as members of one body, you are called to live in peace and always be thankful. Let the message about Christ in all its richness fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom he gives. Sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts. And whatever you do or say, do it as a representative of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Tēnā koutou. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te atua, nānā ngā mea katoa e hanga. Ko te mihi tuarua ki te kaikarakia, me kai waiata tabia a band, Adrian, Victoria, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. If I haven't met you before, my name is Caleb, and I'm the vicar here with my wife Billy, who's currently on retreat. So I've been single dadding for a couple of nights. I don't really recommend that. Yeah, if you've done that, I am really impressed, and I'm not made for that really. I have a sister who did that with her first kid, and I'm just in awe. So bless you. Anyway, that's just a little personal thing. But we are in the middle of, or not in the middle of, we're at the beginning, towards the beginning of a sermon series that is working through this passage on Colossians 3, 1 to 17. If you regularly come to our service and you've been here for the last 2 Sundays, you'll notice it's the same reading. It will be the same reading until the end of the term. So the reason why is that it's such a rich passage that we actually could spend longer on it, and we're only just scratching the surface on some of the issues. So on the first week, I talked about that you have died, and you know that is great news. You don't have to run your life anymore. You can realign your allegiance to Jesus. Jesus, as it describes in Colossians chapter 1, is the one who holds all things together, who's the one who's got it all sorted out. You can let him rule your life. So we talked about realigning our allegiance to him. Let Jesus call the shots in your life. Don't let your mortgage call your shots in your life, or what somebody said over you in your past, or whatever it is. Let Jesus call those shots. So that was week 1. Week 2, Billy kind of went into the next deeper level, and she talked about setting your mind on Jesus. This is so key. This is the transformation stuff. I'm going to scribble on the board a lot today. But these are the circles. Again, I don't have time to unpack these, but if you want to hear about them, then you can go back to one of our old sermons on the soul. But in the middle, you've got your will, and then you've got your mind, and then there's your body, and then there's your relationships, and then the whole thing is called the soul. That's what combines it all together. But your will is affected so much by your mind. That's why Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Yeah? That's where it takes place. That's where most of the work needs to happen, and then your will activate. Okay? So that's why Billy then talked about setting your mind. I love that image. Does everyone remember the image that she talked about being set? Jelly. That's right. So often we have a softened jelly, like still being made version of following Jesus. It kind of, it's kind of cool because it kind of gets involved in everything and it's a little bit sticky, but it's not set. Do you know what I mean? When it's set, it's fixed, it's fixated upon. And that is what we're invited to at the beginning of this passage to do with Jesus. Fix your mind on him. And then everything else will flow right. Okay, you have to do that work. And now what we're going to do for the rest of the series is look about how this works out in our life. There's some really good things that are coming. We're going to be talking about putting on compassion and love and joy and peace and how that works out. Today we're going to talk about the yuck stuff. Okay? We're going to get down to that level to talk about some of the stuff that we do that is actually destructive to you, but mostly the reason why he's talking about this stuff is it's destructive to other people. Yeah? Yeah? Anyone had someone angry at them? It's destructive to you, eh? Yeah? That's what we're talking about this morning, okay? So I just want to start by sharing a couple of stories because it lightens up the discussion. And the first story is a walk that I went on, actually with Tabia, who's our worship leader this morning. A walk I went on with her 11 years ago. And we were living in this monastery in the north coast of Devon in England. And I had this little favourite prayer space that was just off the cliff down on this beautiful grassy area. And we knew that around if you go along the coast, there's a valley and you can go down that valley onto a beach. And that beach actually was a really important place for Tabs and Billy and I. And I'd swum with Billy around the coast. And we figured that you could therefore walk along the edge of the cliff or along the rocks to get to the beach. So Tabs and I and my dog Canna went down the cliff and clambered our way down and started walking along the rocks to the beach. It was probably going to take us about an hour. So we start walking along. We get about 80% of the way there, and what happens is we get to this point where there's a cave. And we realised that we can't actually get across it, and that the tide has started to come in, and so then now there's about 3 meters between us and the other side, and at that moment we had to debate whether we were going to get wet, which we were not prepared to do, or to head back, and we decided, it's starting to get dark. We can get back, it's all right. So we turn around and we start heading back. Of course, it starts to rain, and it starts to get darker, and what happens is it starts getting a bit slippy. Anyway, we get to this point where, on the way along, we had clambered down and walked along the bottom and then clambered our ways back up. But by the time we got there, the tide had come in, and now we could no longer do that. Okay? You're kind of, stuck. And but by the grace of God, there's this kind of ledge that went across. And this ledge had a kind of inlet like this. So basically, the cliff comes down, and then it kind of inleted like this, which was really helpful because you could just kind of bend like this and shimmy yourself across. So that was fine for me. Tabs did the same. She shimmied across. And then I had to call my dog, who was not at all interested. It's like, come on, it's okay, come on. And she starts sort of, doing this, etc. It's a little bit slippy. She's a little bit nervous. The tide is coming in underneath, and etc. So I shimmy across the other side. And then what I do is I come down and say, it's okay. There's loads of space. You can get down there. Go on. And try to get her. Tabs is calling the other side. She's not at all interested, right? So I discern that what I have to do is I have to carry her across. Okay, so I pick up Canna, I talk her through, we're pretty close, so it's okay. We got this, Canna, it's totally fine. It's okay. We start shuffling along like this. We get about halfway across, and a big wave comes in and splashes up. And suddenly Canna goes like this all over the place. No, it's okay, Hannah, it's gonna be fine. Thinking, I'm gonna end up in this. There's rocks, there's water everywhere. Shuffle ourselves along, and what happens is I finally get her down, and she runs right off of the rocks, way up to the top of the cliff, and sits there until we get there. Utterly afraid. As I was walking, I was thinking, why did she do that? Okay, why did she do that? Like, Canna doesn't like swimming, okay? So, and doesn't like water. So you'd kind of go, okay, maybe that was right. But why was she okay at the beginning, but not okay in the middle? And then I remembered, because she didn't like swimming, my dad had created this technique to try and get Canna to swim, which was that he'd pick her up and he'd walk out into the middle of the sea and then drop her into the water. Right, which of course, Canna, who's as a dog can swim, right? So just swims and gets back onto the beach. But she had this trauma in her, yeah? And so going over the water triggered her trauma. Here, I want to tell you another story of, this is a fictional story, but one I heard about a guy called Little Jimmy. Little Jimmy was an artist prodigy, okay, absolutely outstanding, 7 years old, incredible eye for things, incredible skill. And his mum said to him, look, you've got to share some of this work with your friends. You've got to show them what it is. And so anyway, Jimmy decides he's going to take his latest piece of artwork to school for show and tell. So he goes to school, and the teacher invites Jimmy forward. Jimmy's a little bit nervous because it's his own craft, and it's vulnerable sharing this with yourself. So he goes to the front, and the teacher says, go on, just lift it high so that everyone can see. And he lifts it up like this, at which point everybody in the classroom bursts out laughing. Because Jimmy didn't realize his fly was undone. But Jimmy went back to his seat, and he never painted again. What happens in your past affects your decisions, doesn't it? Sometimes because it's something that's happened to you, or sometimes it's an opinion that you've made up that's not even true. Yeah? I'll just see if there's a... Thank you. Oh, that's not much better. Thanks, Adrian. That's right, he never handed. Okay, this is another one that I chucked in a sermon once, where we talk about the story that we tell ourselves, yes? So an event takes place, and then we tell ourselves a story, which gives us an emotion, and then we act, okay? So when I taught on this, I used the example of I'm sitting on my bed watching some football, Billy is folding the clothes at the end of the bed, and she gives a big sigh. Right? At that moment in time, I tell myself a story that she thinks I don't do enough work, and I start winding up in my head that actually I do, and I was the one who put the kids to bed tonight, and I'm exhausted, and I had to do extra stuff and work. He said, all of that is a story I've told myself, which creates an emotion, and what comes out? Yeah, whatever action, okay. This is a made-up story, by the way. It didn't happen. Other things that might look like it might have happened. But anyway, what happens is that actually Billy might just be sighing because she had a deep pastoral conversation with someone that afternoon, and she's caring for that person. Do you know what I mean? But I've told myself the wrong story, like Jimmy did. But it affects your actions. What you think about affects your choices. The reason I tell these two stories today is because I'm going to be talking about behavior. Okay? And when we talk about behavior, you have to be really careful. You will, if you have been observant, you'll have noticed that we very, very rarely in our sermons talk about behaviors. Okay, because if you talk about behaviors, what happens is legalism comes along. People hit you over the head and say, oh, because you're doing that, you need to suppress that, or you need to sort that out. Are you with me? Yeah? So I'm going to list, hopefully I'm going to find a pen that works nicely. There's a brand new one where? Oh.
So Andrew gave you a brand new tote.
Oh, okay. Can you read that at all? Maybe it's the board. No, it's not the board. The board's awesome. Can you read that? No? That worked out. Talking about behavior. Okay? In this passage, it talks about some behaviors. Okay? When you talk about behavior, you have to be really cautious. Firstly, I've got 8 things to do here. If you're someone who writes notes, write it down. If you're not someone who writes notes, write these down. Okay? Put them in your phone because they're actually just really good insights. Okay? So the first one is that behavior is a symptom. Okay? It's all that stuff I just talked about with the circles. What you think about has an effect on it. What's happened in your past experiences. If you've had trauma in your past, whether it's something like being over water or being on heights, or whether it's something much more deeply psychological that affects you every day, it leads to a behavior. Yes? Yeah? So you have to be conscious that when we talk about behaviors, they come from somewhere. Yeah? The second thing I want to name is that behavioral management doesn't work. Sorry if you're employed in a job that thinks that it does. But it doesn't work, okay? This is what the church has tried to do for a long time, is fix this issue here. But that doesn't work, because this still exists. If you've got someone who shouts a lot, okay, all right, what might happen is you might put in some strategies about giving, talking to them about it, or coming vulnerably and challenging them on it. Or perhaps you decide, because they're a young person or whatever, that you're just going to ignore them a few times, okay? But what happens if the story that they're telling themselves from whatever in their past is that they shout because nobody listens to them? If you've ignored them, what have you done? You've made it worse. Are you with me? This happens on every behavior, on every level, okay? Whatever is your issue that's here, that you might think that the church has cracked down on, or you might think that Scripture is dealing with here, Scripture never deals with it this way. If you read that in Scripture that way, that's not how it's dealing with it, okay? It deals with this stuff. It deals with these parts, yes? When you've done those, then it affects your will. Are you with me? That's why Jesus rages at the Pharisees. He doesn't rage, actually, because rage is one of the bad things. Yeah, but that's why he spends so much time dealing with the Pharisees, because the Pharisees do this stuff. Yeah? And he calls them whitewashed tombs. The Pharisees were the people that everyone in the culture thought were the best, were the most holy. But Jesus saw their heart, and he said, no, they're really not. And if you follow their way, it's destructive of your soul. You have to deal with the deep stuff. You have to deal with the stuff underneath. I heard a great quote from C.S. Lewis that Miriam read out in our small group this last week that talked about you have to cultivate the soil underneath that's going on. Okay, you've got to deal with that stuff. Just to jump into our passage for a second, as I sat meditating on this passage, I am really serious, by the way, that I'd love it if everyone in this room and everyone that's part of our congregation memorized Colossians 3:1-17. You've got a term to do it, and it's possible, more than possible. Your memory is a muscle, so you might only be able to do 3 or 4 words on the first week, but then it'll build and it'll build and it'll build. And then you can get to it. I memorized this passage in an hour and a half. Okay, now I'm an actor, okay? So memorizing my muscle is very good at that, okay? I've been activating that, but you can get there. I was reading this week about a guy who's memorized 43 books of the Bible. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that amazing? When I shared that, someone in my small group went, what does he do for a living? But if you get good at it, you get good at it. Why not get good at that? Do you know what I mean? Just saying. Okay, anyway, so I was sitting, meditating on this passage, going, what is it that's talking about here when it's saying, put to death whatever in you is ungodly. Whatever in you, put it to death. What is it meaning about that? What is in this passage? And as you go on, it says these things here. Verse 7, 2 words jumped out to me, one from verse 7, one from verse 10. One from verse 7 is this: these are the ways in which you once followed. Yeah? And the ways you once followed when you were living that life, or you were living with such people. This is exactly what I've just been talking about, yes? You followed that way, and the natural result was you lived that way. Okay? If you fill your mind with that stuff, that's what comes out. I remember watching the TV series The Wire. Anyone seen The Wire? Absolutely outstanding TV series. I think it's one of the greatest things that has been on television, except for the fact that they swear all the time through it. And I found myself swearing in my head. Now, I don't swear at all, okay? That's not something that just wasn't part of my upbringing, okay? But I found myself, I'm watching this stuff, I'm getting drawn into these people's lives, and I'm finding myself using words that are actually really defaming of others. I don't want to do that. I had to catch myself and go, okay, stop binge watching The Wire, yeah? Can occasionally watch, but I need to spend more time in the Word than I do in The Wire. Yeah? That was a good line. Okay, so last year I talked about Psalm 1. Anyone remember the sermon series on Psalm 1? We looked at Psalm 1, we talked about blessed is the one who does not walk in the way of the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the seat of scoffers. Yeah? Because it's a slippery slope when you end up in that direction. If you start putting your mind into something that is not Jesus, it just slides away. In fact, in Romans 1, it talks about all sorts of degrading and destructive things. You move away from natural things to unnatural things because you start worshipping the creation, not the creator. Yeah? You need to realign your allegiances to Jesus. You need to set your mind on things that are above, because that's what happens. That's the following piece. And then the other word comes in verse 10 that stood out to me. It says, now clothe yourselves with the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge. Okay? We need to know this stuff. Sometimes we don't know it. Okay, when we name, I'll come to that in a minute. I just want to state for a second, if you've got a life, well, we all do. You have lives of habits that are selfish or caught up in yourself or anxiety-driven or whatever it is, or you know, seeking dopamine hits on Facebook or whatever it is that you get caught up in, bitterness, etc. The greatest thing that you can do is come before Jesus, okay? When we talk about spiritual disciplines, etc., the greatest thing you can do is put yourself simply before Jesus. I'm not talking about just reminding yourself of his goodness or speaking some liturgy or singing some songs. Those are really, really helpful. But I'm talking about actually connecting with Jesus, deeply, heart to heart. That's the place that the transformation can work, where God can really work in the deep caverns of your soul. Okay, now that takes a lot of work to get there. You have to clear your diary. You have to find a space that is going to be uninterrupted. You have to be vulnerable enough to open up. You have to be vulnerable enough and realign, remember that God is actually good and that he's not going to smash you if you come close to him, which most of us think he is. Yeah? You come to him with naked intent and say, here I am, change my heart. Now that deals with almost everything. Okay? If you pursue a heart that engages straight on with God's heart and you create a rhythm of life with that, that will deal with most things. But it is necessary occasionally just to sit and realign to the behaviors. Okay? We name them because we need to see them. You need to see the way you really are. And you need to see the life that you could have if you didn't live them. Yes? The other thing that you need to do is you need to learn or be reminded of things. Sometimes we read something in Scripture and you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah? Go, gosh, I've been living that way and now it's convicting me. Okay? Sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we need to be reminded because actually we've been living our life apart from God, and we just let our desires run amok. Yeah? I'm just going to name 4 resistances. There's so more. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just 8 things that came to my head, okay? Number 5, these are 4 resistances that you put up when I'm about to name these issues, okay? When you name these behaviors that the Scripture is telling us, the first thing that comes up is, who are you to tell me what's right and wrong? Yeah? You may have already been thinking that during this sermon, okay? And if you have, that's fine. Just name that that's a resistance, okay? That's called pride, yeah? It's called you think that you know better, yes? Be really careful of that. Scripture's really, really cautious of that. It tells us to be cautious of that. Your own pride is really unhelpful. You have to remember that Jesus is the greatest teacher. If you don't see him as a teacher in the way of life, you won't follow him in your way of life. If all you have thought about is that Jesus is here to die for you and to rise again, to deal with the sin at that moment, and that you'll see him again when you're in heaven, then this life is totally and utterly irrelevant. And you can carry on being horrible and broken. But that isn't what, he's the greatest teacher. His teaching has never been paralleled. It's absolutely outstanding. In fact, if you look at the history of the 300 years that followed Jesus, all of the major philosophers, all of them became Christians. Do you know why? Because they saw him and went, oh my goodness, he's figured out what Plato was trying to figure out. What Aristotle was trying to figure out, Jesus has nailed it. Yeah? Just read Augustine. That's what he's like. He's just completely turned it up. Origin. He's just Aquinas. They're just like, Jesus got it. You've got to deal with the inside of the cup. You've got to do it. Jesus is the greatest teacher. Be careful who your teacher is. It might be the person that you most like to read or listen to a podcast of. Or it might be your parents' opinions about the way you should live your life. Be careful if it's that, because your parents might be wrong. And the other one, which is rife in our culture, and it needs to be really looked at, is you say, well, I figure out what my truth is. I hear all of the voices, and then I make my decision. Are you serious? Do you think you know more? Like, in however many decades you've lived, do you think you know more about the soul than, people who've really, really studied, or people who have immersed themselves, or the creator of the universe? Do you think you know more? Do you? No. So don't base your moral law upon what you think, or even worse, what you feel. How common is this? Well, I sat there and I felt that this was right, so I went for it. Do your feelings get to dictate what is right and wrong? Do they? I'm naming something here that most of us in this room have said, including myself. I'm not hitting you with a stick that I'm not hitting myself with, okay? This is real, team. We go, it feels right, so I did it. Are you with me? Do you think your feelings are better than Jesus' teaching? Do they? If you do, that's great, but you can leave, because the rest of the sermon is going to be wasted on you. In fact, you should come up and speak instead of me. My feelings don't, seriously. I can't tell you how many times in 3 weeks looking at Colossians 3, 1-17, I can't tell you how many times I've been deeply convicted. Oh, shoot, I've been living like this. I've been doing this is one of my deep desires. I've got to keep coming back to it. Okay, so the first one is Jesus is the greatest teacher. Okay, number 6. It is possible to change. Okay? So many of us think that it's not possible. Okay? So many of us. We go, I just can't deal with that. Yeah? Or, here's one of the biggest judgmental things that almost everyone in this room has said. They can't change, or they won't change. Yeah? You ever said that about someone? Or thought that about someone? Yeah? Or why do I need to change? Yeah, that's a great one. If you think that you've got it solved in life, go for it. Yeah, I know you don't think that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Just to clarify, we're talking about God's agency here. God is more than able to do, immeasurably more than ever you ask or imagine. This is God is able to change. Like, he created the universe, for goodness sake. Yeah? Like, have you seen the stars? He can deal with your soul. Yeah? He really, really can. Okay, number 7, okay? This one, I just sat and I said, Jesus, what is it that I need to highlight here? This is one that I felt that he pointed out to me, okay? Be careful of denying your state of sin. Okay? We don't like talking about sin because it tells us that we're not good. And we don't like feelings that tell us we're not good because we have a culture that tells us avoid pain. Okay? All right? We find it really difficult. Right, so, for example, we find it easy to say, yes, I lied. Some people find that hard. But we find it easy to say, yes, I lie. I lie. But we find it really hard to say, I'm a liar. Yeah? We find it possible to say, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. We find it really hard to say, I am someone who makes lots of mistakes. Because suddenly I'm untrustworthy. Yeah? And it touches that tender, vulnerable place inside your soul where you tell yourself that you're not good enough. Yeah? Which therefore equals you're not worthy of love. That's what you tell yourself, yes? Let me tell you something. You are a liar. You are someone who routinely makes mistakes. You are deeply broken. You are not good enough. But it doesn't equal that you're not worthy of love. Okay? Don't deny this, because that's a lie. Your worth is always based upon how much someone will pay for you. And heaven was bankrupted for you. Yeah? He paid everything for you. So don't let the truth that you are not good enough, or what other voice, sibling or parent or teacher said over you that you're too selfish. Does anyone have a sibling that tells you you're selfish? I have 3 siblings, I have 3 hands to go up. I am deeply selfish, and they've told me that. I'm controlling, they've told me that, because it's true. If I deny it, I deceive myself, and the truth is not in me. Yeah? Okay. Number 8, last one before I'm going to start naming the awkward things, okay? Number 8, culture, our current culture, has no-go zones on desires. Okay? I need to name this. This is a landmine I'm about to stand on, okay? Our culture tells us there are some things that you can't talk about. And it says that some desires can be untamed. Yes? You have to be really careful about that. You have to be really careful about that. Okay? This is a landmine, okay? We talk about people's sexuality and people's gender. All we're talking about is desires. Okay? Culture says we can't talk about them. It's put a ring fence around it. Okay? You have to be really careful about that. Because who's the teacher? Is it you? Or is it Jesus? This is hard because our culture's thick in this room. And the squirming that's going on in your body is real. Yeah? You have to be conscious of that. What is dictating the play? Who holds the allegiance? Are you with me? This is vulnerable. I knew that by preaching this sermon today, there'll be some people who will leave this church. I know that. I know there are some people in here who will write me emails because of this sermon, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay. I have a desire to people please, and I've had to let that go this week. Okay? We let it go. Wisdom and goodness gets to call the shots, not my desires. Yeah? Okay? So, behavior is a symptom. Behavioral management doesn't work. You have to deal with the core issues. Naming our behaviors helps us see. It teaches us and reminds us of things. We have to remember that Jesus is the greatest teacher. We come humbly to this stuff. That it is possible to change. Don't deny your state of sin or the world's state of sin. And be careful of the culture's no-go zones. Okay? Beware of them. That's culture's voice, not Jesus' voice. Yeah? Okay. Feeling the weight? Yeah? Eugene Peterson, in his Message version, uses a translation here. When we talk about passion and evil desires, he phrases it like this: doing whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like it. Yeah? That's a life run by desire. Now, desire in itself is not bad. It's just it's rubbish at leading. It shouldn't call the shots. Okay, I'm going to read a bunch of lists, not just this one from Colossians 3, because none of the lists in Scripture are exhaustative. Okay? I'm not going to name everything today. You might be sitting there, oh, I hope he says this. I hope you don't think that, but you might be saying that. But we have to sit there and recognize that Scripture names a bunch of stuff. Some of them are behaviors, some of them are root causes. But Jesus in his wisdom shared in his teaching on the Sermon on the Mount between Matthew 5 and 7, things as adultery, as lust, as murder, as anger, judging others, lying, manipulating, hypocrisy, anxiety. All of them need to go. The Apostle Paul writes a number of vice lists, like this one in Colossians 3, which talks about sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires and greed, which is idolatry, anger, rage, malice, putting people down, filthy language from your lips, lying to each other. In Romans 12, he talks about lagging in zeal, so not being passionate for Jesus, considering yourself better than you are, cursing others, repaying evil for evil. In Romans 13, he talks about drunkenness, sexual immorality, indulgence in unhealthy things, breaking unity, being jealous. In 1 Corinthians 13, he talks about envy, boasting, arrogance, rudeness. He talks about insisting on getting your own way. Irritable, resentful. Galatians chapter 5, he talks about gratifying the desires of the flesh, sexual immorality, impurity, idolatry, sorcery. That's anything that is like magic stuff that's not good, okay? That's like tarot cards, yeah? That's sorcery. That's dangerous stuff, going to a seance. Don't go near those things, okay? Don't go near them. That's the wisdom that's being said here. Don't go to someone to contact someone else about someone who's died. What do we call that? Spiritualism. Be dangerous to that. That is what this is talking about here. Okay? Big stuff, team. Jealousy, anger, quarreling, creating factions, envy, drunkenness. Ephesians chapter 4, deceiving others. We all do that all the time. Stealing, evil talk, bitterness, wrath, putting people down, malice. Ephesians 5, sexual immorality and impurity of any kind, greed. In 1 Timothy 3, Paul writes about drunkenness, violence, quarreling again, loving money, being double-tongued. 1 Timothy 6 talks about craving for controversy, envy, dissension, suspiciousness, love of money, eager to be rich. In the letter that James writes, he talks about bitter envy, selfish ambition, boastfulness, and being false to the truth. Jesus describes that out of the human heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, lying, slander, envy, pride, and folly. In Romans 1, it describes that when we choose other things to worship or hold our allegiance or to fill our minds with other things, this leads us down a destructive path, even to the degrading of our bodies. It describes that they have exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. They also ended up with a depraved mind, which leads to wickedness, evil, covetousness, malice, envy, murder, strife, deceit, craftiness, gossip, slander, insolence, being boastful, inventing evil, being rebellious, foolish, faithless, heartless, having no commitment, no love, and no mercy. In 1 Corinthians 6, it says, wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God. Neither the sexually immoral or idolaters or adulterers, nor men who've had sex with men, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor swindlers, none of them will inherit the kingdom of God. Again, I'm not talking about behavioral management. This is not hitting people on the head. You know what ones on that list are appropriate to you. This is not hitting you on the head, and guilt doesn't work. Oppressing and forcing it down doesn't work. You have to listen to Jesus, the greatest teacher, and come to deep transformation. Realign your allegiances to him. Dallas Willard, in his absolutely outstanding, you should look it up, article called Beyond Pornography, okay? And he uses pornography as a case study to talk about basically the way that desires run amok in our lives, okay? It's absolutely outstanding, and it's basically a distilled version of his book, Renovation of the Heart. If you haven't read that, buy it and read it. If you find it too difficult because he's a philosopher and it's really wordy, get the easier version, which is called Revolution of Character, I think it's called that. Dallas Willard's Renovation of the Heart. We have to deal with this stuff. This is what he says in Beyond Pornography. He says, we're not talking about repressing desire or about denying its reality. We're talking here about not having the desire. Yeah? Are you with me? Do you want that? Do you want that? Do you want to live a life where you don't have that desire anymore? And the exhaustion of trying to fight against it, you could just let it go? Do you want that? That's what's on offer. I want that. I don't have that, but I want that. I want to orientate my life around that. It doesn't say in here, occasionally work on that difficulty that you've got, or your anger, or it doesn't say, it says, put to death, therefore, whatever in you is ungodly. Rid yourself of all such things. Tom Wright, in his Colossians commentary, talks about that the old way of thinking is that you've got these wild animals of your desires and you put them in cages and you lock them up. Yeah? But here in Colossians, what happens is Paul gives you the insight that what you actually need to do is kill the wild animals. This is why Jesus, when he talks about adultery, he says deal with lust. Because if you deal with lust, you won't have adultery. Are you with me? That's what is the invitation here. Here, I've just got a little quote from Evagrius, who was a solitary monk in the 4th century. Okay, sometimes it's good to read about monks from the 4th century. They have some great insights. He says this: man cannot drive away impassioned thoughts. Man cannot drive away impassioned thoughts unless he watches over his desire. He talks about desire, destroying that through fasting, prayer vigils, sleeping on the ground. He talks about long-suffering, forbearance, forgiveness, acts for compassion. We'll talk about that later on in the sermon series. And he talks about that we need to overcome attachment to food and possessions, and our attachment to self-esteem, even to our very body. And then he says this: it's essential then to imitate people who are in danger at sea and throw things overboard because of the violence of the winds and the threatening waves. Your sin is running amok in your life. Throw it overboard. Don't sit with it for a little while and hope that the lion can be tamed. It can't be tamed. Get rid of it. Kill it. Put it to death, therefore. Are you with me? You can do that. It is possible. There's a great story from Benedict, Saint Benedict. Whenever he sinned, he threw himself into the briar patch. Okay? That's the spiky stuff, yeah? So whenever he sinned, he threw himself into there, right? At that moment, you say to me, are you serious? And I say, are you serious? Guys, unchecked sin is what is crushing our world. You wonder why we have poverty? It is greed in you. You wonder why we have such brokenness with sex trafficking? That's because we've let lust call the shots. Yeah? You wonder why we have such pain that gets caused by adultery or brokenness of marriage. Yeah? It's because we need to come to him. He has wisdom on all of these things. He has grace. Everything you've ever done is wiped clean by his blood. Do not sit here feeling guilty. He offers full forgiveness, and he offers you that dream that you haven't even dared to dream, that you can be holy. He offers you that, and there's zero judgment. You don't name these things to judge. That's called behavioral management. We don't do bigotry. We don't hit people with stuff. We don't condemn them. We don't judge them. Don't judge yourself or condemn yourself. Just come forward and say, I need to have this reshaped. That is what's invited here. Just want to share some testimonies to finish off. I've just got about 5 stories to share. Got a friend who has got rid of his phone, and he's got a dumb phone. You know, like one of those ones that used to only text and call, yeah? And the reason he's done that is because he has a dopamine addiction to scrolling in Facebook. And so he radically got rid of that phone. He doesn't even have it anymore. Because it sucked his life away. It sucked his attention from his kids. So he got what we call a dumb phone, okay? And all he can do is text and call. Can't even read his emails on his phone, yeah? You go, well, how do I get in contact with him? Come on. Aren't his kids worth more than him responding to an email? Yes? This is where we've got to go, folks. I have another friend who has turned his phone black and white. And the reason for this is, you need to know this, folks, that social media literally got psychologists around to figure out what colors were the most inviting that would mean you are more addicted to it. They literally have had those discussions. What color, what type of format on the phone will make people more addicted to it so that they scroll longer, so that they see more adverts, so that we get more money. That is, I'm not lying. Guys, this is literally what happened. Facebook sat around and had that conversation. Twitter had the same. Instagram had the same. They want to get it so that you are hooked. So my friend, who is enticed by those things because he's an aesthetic architect, has turned his phone black and white so that it no longer has a rule on him. That's radical. It means it's not exciting for him anymore. He doesn't get that dopamine hit, but it doesn't run amok on his life. I had a great friend called Dave, and we were mates in our early 20s, and we were in the same monastery that I was with Tabs and Billy, and he had an issue with masturbation. Okay, and so he took some drastic issues with that. Okay, so what he did is he said like whenever he'd struggle with it at night time, he'd go into the room next door, right, and he'd bang on the door and say, "Can I sleep in here, please?" And the other guy, who was an older fellow, would say, "Yeah, sure." And then Dave would sleep on the floor because like it would be awkward if he carried on his desires at that moment. Are you with me? Suddenly it couldn't happen anymore. Yeah? But it had to be more than that. So Dave and I decided that we would get up before dawn and pray once a week. Dave was more devout than I. He had to wake me up pretty much every time. But we would get up and pray. And we'd pray for our souls, but then we would pray for everyone else's souls. And we'd care for them. And suddenly we get this heart that cares for other people and not just immersed in myself. And then suddenly the desire starts to disappear. Isn't that good news? You can radically do these things. I had issues with lust too. So I chose to go to a monastery and to live somewhere where I had no internet access. Porn was just coming into the scene on the internet. I actually didn't fall onto that, and I'm really grateful, because if I had been born, 2 years later, that would have run amok on my life. It would have run amok on my life, but I'm graced, not because I was good, but because porn wasn't available on the internet. But when it started to be, I lived somewhere where I had no internet connection, because I didn't want it. I wanted to rid that out. I didn't want to think of women as an object of desire. I wanted to see them as children of the king, of princesses, and not something for my desire. Do you know what I mean? I want to rid that. And now, praise Jesus, because what I also decided to do is I decided to spend 3 days a month in silence and fasting. I wanted to deal with this stuff. There was more than that in my issues and culture. But I did that. And what happened is I now no longer desire it. I don't know about you, but I get regular messages from ladies who want to be my friends on Messenger. Anyone else get that? Scantily clad, they can offer some pictures if I would like to, and they could be my friend. Honestly, I'm not even tempted. It used to be a temptation for me, but it's not now, because my desire has gone. I'm not suppressing my desire. If you try to suppress your desire, I tried to do that in my late teens, it just doesn't work. It comes out in anger, or it comes out in something else, or it breaks through and then you feel guilty. But I dealt with the desire, and now when it turns up, do you know what I do? I pray for the lady, that she'd be free from whatever is oppressing her. Whether it's her own need for affirmation or whether it is somebody else who's causing her to do that, which is much more likely. But I don't have that desire anymore. And I want to be like that. Here's another one. I have an issue with busyness. Anyone else have the same issue as me? Okay? So my busyness comes from wanting to achieve things, right? And that comes from two spheres. The first one is because I'm a terrible people pleaser. I want people to like me, okay? And that comes from seeking affirmation. So I need to deal with that issue. Okay, my second other issue is that I get that chemical hit when I finish something. Does anyone love the pleasure of finishing something? Yes? Wipe and clean the bench? Yeah? Oh, so good. When the lawns are freshly mowed, sense of control. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the stuff, right? But actually I'm driving towards that. I'm seeking that hit, or I'm seeking the affirmation. So you know what I decided I desperately needed? Was to live in an environment where people got under my skin, where they interrupted me and I couldn't complete my tasks. I'm not just talking about having kids, because that is what happens. Right? I'm talking about that I chose to live in community, because suddenly people see me. I have four adults who live in our house, who Billy and I are training up to be leaders in Jesus, but they're also there because I need them. They get under my skin in more ways than I can imagine. And, and that's really good because then I see what is under my skin. I get to see it. That actually I'm driving this busyness, sense of achievement. I'm trying to get affirmation, and these guys don't give it to me, you know? And that's important. It is important because I want to be free from it. I want to put it to death. Also, this sense of achievement and desire run amok in my life. I don't know if you have the same problem, but because I wanted the new thing and the exciting thing, what happens is that regular rhythm of morning Bible study and prayer time, that was really hard to keep because there was something more exciting to do or something that I could get done or something to get completed. I'll do that first. You might not have that issue, but I had that issue. So I invite people to live in my life because now we do prayers every morning and every night. And I go because everyone else is in the lounge waiting for me. You know? Actually, so true. I'm usually the last one in there. But that, I have to put that in my life. I have to put to death my individualism. Now, you'll have a different set of issues. You won't have my issues because you're not me. But you've got your own. Do you know what they are? If you don't know what your drivers are, then you need a silent retreat or 10. Okay? You need a good Christian counselor, a good one, who will open up and help you see. Or you just need to journal. I wrote a letter to Jesus this last week. And suddenly I was like, oh, shoot, there's another level down. That I am yuck. Yeah? You need to see that. That's why we name these behaviors. You need to know what they are. And then you can put them to death. Put to death the desire. Realign it to the fullness and the beauty of God. So if you know what it is, then what are you going to do about it? Radically. I'm not talking about occasional spiritual disciplines. Remember I said this 2 weeks ago? Radically reorganize your life around Jesus. Not because Caleb says it's a good thing to do, but because it's the way that life works. It's the most beautiful thing. A soul alive in Jesus. Take a moment. What is he inviting you to work on? And how can you radically put it to death? Come, Holy Spirit, and speak to our souls. Thank you, Lord. Just going to call us back together now because this work actually is a deep work that's not going to happen in 3 minutes. But we need to choose to want it. Whatever he was triggering you here, go away and work on that. Okay? Just a couple of things to think on. One is that if you're not part of a small group, get to be part of a small group. If you are part of a small group, we've got some extra deep questions this week. If your leader doesn't ask them, say, why are you not asking us these questions? Okay? But they're really vulnerable. Okay? They're not my questions, they're John Wesley's questions. One of them is this: when were you tempted last, and what did you do? Do you want to put it to death? Share with your small group, it's safe. They'll do the same. Let's get rid of this stuff, okay? The next is that this is the gig. This is life in its fullness. Can you imagine if we not only were deeply transformed into the way of Jesus and reorganized our life, but we went out and helped other people do the same? Can you imagine if this city became a place where anger didn't exist? Please be imagining. Please immerse your mind in that. See it, that anger doesn't exist in the city, that gossip doesn't exist in the city. Wouldn't that be amazing? Can you imagine what could be unlocked if we actually did this? Folks, that's called the kingdom of God. It's where what he wants done gets done, not just in you, not just in your family, not just in your workplace, but in your organizations across this city. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we actually did this work, which is absolutely possible because God's offering it to you? Can you imagine? I want that. I want that so much. I want to reorganize my life around him so that that happens. Amen? Let me pray. Jesus, I pray that you would be so wonderfully involved right now. I thank you that you are gentle on our hearts, that you don't judge us, that you give us mercy, and you offer us wholeness in you. And you offer this city wholeness, and you ask us to help you with it. So Jesus, come. Build your kingdom here, we pray. Let the darkness fear, for you are coming. Amen.